I've been a backyard mechanic, hobbyist, whatever, for a long, long time. And I've done most of that work in my early years with basic tools. Like I did a video recently with sort of a top 10 list of tools you want to spend your money on if you're getting started in this hobby. And I probably had in the early days half of those tools, mostly due to budget on those. These tools are a little different though. These are tools that most of them anyway, are not terribly expensive. They're actually pretty reasonable. And tools that I could have bought a long time ago and for whatever reason didn't. And now that I have them, I question why I ever lived without them, because they have made my life so much easier. Some of them I thought were gimmicky and thought I'd never really use. Some of them I couldn't afford. Some of them I didn't even know about. Like maybe they didn't even exist. There's actually one on this list that when I was young doing this work, that technology didn't exist yet, or at least not in consumer form. So let's get into the list. 10 tools I wish I bought a lot sooner. I should start by saying I don't have any particular brand affiliation or sponsorship. Buy what you want from wherever you want, but the links down below, they're just examples. But if you do buy something off those links on Amazon, I do get a little kickback and that helps the channel. And if you do, just want you to know I appreciate it. Let's get into the list. So first up, you've seen me use these maybe a few times and I've used them a ton. In fact, this kit is probably 10 years old, and that is these plastic trim tools. I would put a link down to this one, but I think this one's I think this company's long gone, but I'll put a link down to a different one that's very similar. And it's just a variety of these plastic pry bars. This is mostly for interior trim and molding removal. It doesn't scratch as much, it doesn't damage the panels as much, they're less likely to break. I used to, early days, I would take a big screwdriver or a small screwdriver, depending on what I needed, and wrap it in like either microfiber towel or sometimes even like some painter's tape, just to keep it from scratching up the surface. And that worked okay. When you're pulling off like dashboard panels or something like that, trim panels inside the car, it's too rigid and it cracks. Even though it might not scratch it, just the prying of it can crack a little bit. These have a little flexibility to them to prevent from breaking that panel. It gives a little bit of give when it pops those clips loose. They come in different shapes and sizes, and some of these kits include a metal pry bar, like a little fork pry bar, which I don't have, and I kind of wish I did. This kit didn't include that, but I'm going to pick one of those up here shortly. That can also be really helpful for those trim clips. But I find I've used this in a bunch of different places for a bunch of different things, not just for auto interior. And it's a handy kit and it's super cheap. Like for the cost, there was no reason not to buy this a long time ago. This one's kind of nice because it's got this little bag. You can fold it up and it folds up this way. And it's got a little Velcro panel and it stores away relatively small. Sometimes though, these are a little bit too flexible and they don't get the pins, like especially those fastener clips, those push pins that they use in body panels and trim panels and stuff. And these can be a little too bendy. That brings us to tool number 2 on my list, is these clip removal tools. These are really handy. I have 2 of them. There's a couple different varieties. These I find I use most of the time, especially for the clips that are just a single top with a push pin, or you're trying to pull them out and they got those teeth on them, they just don't want to come out. And you just stick this underneath that head and you just pop it loose and it pops those pins right out. And the other one I like that I use on different kind of clips are these. These are kind of a forked pliers. And I'll show you here how they work. Like you can just pull in these pins that have they have a 2-piece pin. So it's got an insert and it pulls up and then pulls the whole pin out all in one pull. Sometimes it pulls the pin out and then you got to pull the bottom piece out by itself, but oftentimes they just pull out all at once. This is a super handy tool. I've had this one for a little while. I bought this one when I started working on this car to pull pins out from the front of the bumper that I couldn't get in with this, that were recessed way back into a hole. And man, this was super valuable. I think it's like 10 bucks. I mean, 10 bucks a piece, so 20 bucks total. Man, I fought these clips with a little screwdriver trying to pry that up, and it pries halfway up, and then you pry the other side, and the other side, and the other side, and then grab it with a pair of needle nose. Like, this is just pop, 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 and it, like, when you do a couple hundred of these clips, Man, it saves a lot of time. Next tool is a heat gun. This one has an adjustable heat range. I used for years a hair dryer, like just a regular house hair dryer. Usually I borrowed my wife's hair dryer, which didn't make her super happy. The hair dryer can be nice because it actually isn't that hot, but the heat gun is, sometimes you need that extra heat. For things like shrink tubing, like wiring shrink tubing, I for years just used a lighter, and that works too. But I can't tell you how many times I actually melted the casing, the insulation on the wire, trying to get that stuff to shrink up, or my fingers, like burn my fingers. I don't remember how much this was, but you can get them super cheap. You can get them for under 20 bucks. Again, it was one of those tools that once I got it, I found I use it all the time. It's also really good for taking off emblems off the car. So if you are removing, like you're debadging, if you want to do some paint work, you got to take the emblems off, you heat them up, and then you just run some dental floss or something behind it, and they pop right off. So getting that can soften up that adhesive, like gooey, whatever kind of stuff from stickers, get that and then use some Goo Gone. This can help soften it up. And this one came with a bunch of different attachments. So you can do a rather small direct heat. You can do an even smaller direct heat, real focused heat. Wider but flat, plain, like you can have it fan out a little bit. And then this one's my favorite one. You can run this through and it doesn't overheat the surface you're on. So it can be a little bit of a heat shield. The different ones come with different attachments. That's just what this one came with. But you might find you pick a tool up like this, you use it way more than you think. All right, so next on my list is something honestly kind of stupid. The item isn't stupid. I'm stupid. Like why didn't I pick this up a long time ago? And that's these magnetic small parts holders. I used to use like little cups or Tupperware trays or whatever, because we already had them around the house and I'd have to pay for them. But they're not magnetic and they tip over and they're lightweight, and you knock one over and spill 25 bolts all over the place. And if you watched hardly any of my videos, you've probably seen me drop a bolt into a puddle of antifreeze or oil or both. I picked these up in the last like 2 years. And I just kind of thought, like, whatever, what am I going to put in that? And I use them all the time. I mean, it's so stupid how often I use them. And they're, like I said, they're magnetic. They got a rubber covered magnet. You can just stick it anywhere and the parts stick to them magnetically. And that way you don't lose your parts and you don't have to even find drawer space for them, because they stick right to the side of your toolbox. Come in different sizes. They have square, they have rectangle, they have circle, all different sizes. I'll throw a couple links down below, but if you go look on Amazon or Harbor Freight or whatever, they're pretty cheap. You'll find them all over the place. I'm not kidding, like 10 bucks, 20 bucks. It's silly. Let's say you don't have one of these trays, these parts trays, or even if you do, you drop a part anyway. That's where this next tool comes in handy, or at least these set of tools, these pickup tools. This is a magnetic one. I actually had, so this isn't one of those cases where I didn't have one. I actually had one from a long time ago. I think I got it in a toolbox from my grandpa when he passed away. It was an old Snap-on one. It was super nice. But I was like 10 years old, and all I thought it was a sword. So my brother and I would whack each other with them. And that's all I ever did with it. And then it kind of got lost somewhere. And then it wasn't until I got to be, like late teenager, early 20s when I was doing this kind of stuff. And I would drop parts down in the engine. If only I had something magnetic to pick that up with. I never did find that old one, unfortunately. I think maybe I broke it. I don't remember for sure. So, and I have broken several over the years. This is a relatively cheap Craftsman. I picked it up on Amazon. It's telescoping. It's magnetic. If you drop a tool down in their engine somewhere and you can't get your meat hooks in there, you can come out, pull it out with a magnet. But sometimes those tools are magnetic, like aluminum or stainless steel, and you can't pick them up with a magnet. That's where this one comes in. This one's this little plunger handle on it, and it's got this claw. You reach down in there with this and pick up small parts that not very heavy, and then if they're not magnetic, this is not a real strong claw, but it will pick up lightweight stuff like nuts and bolts, and it's flexible versus the telescoping magnetic one that's rigid, so it can bend through into tight spaces a little easier. $5 or $6 a piece for these, And you get, you won't use them all the time, but you drop that one bolt and you can't get it back out, you'll wish you had one of these. In that similar vein of small, cheap, handy tools that you only use once in a while is these pick tools. It's another one of those that I thought, I just use I actually took a screwdriver once and ground it, one of those tiny screwdrivers, and ground it down to a real small point to use it like a pick tool, or use an awl, which isn't that pointy, but it has some pointy tip to it. And just didn't really ever think it was worth spending the money on these. These were so cheap, but these are really cheap ones. Again, these were Harbor Freight ones, and there was a kit. I had another one in here that was a kind of a 90-degree L, and it, like in a trying to pry something with it, it snapped off. And so I'll put a link down below to a better set of these. I think that's a little bit more heavy duty, a little bit higher rated, but just in general, I think these were super cheap. They're less than 10 bucks. And again, it's some of those tools you throw in your toolbox, and when you need them, they're really handy for getting off O-rings or those little snap rings. Now, in addition to those pick tools, the regular pick tools, what I found to actually be super helpful are these dental style pick tools. If you watched, it's a few videos ago, if you watched the steering column video where I worked on the Chevelle, there was a couple of little small pieces, a little snap ring and that I had to get out that ended up using one of these tools. My stepdad was here helping me out, and he had these in his toolkit, and I was just floored. They're thinner, but they're so much stronger. And and they have a nice grip on them, and they're designed for dentists to go digging in your toothers. That was super helpful. And I thought, well, where did you get these? He says, actually, it's kind of a fairly common tool for woodworkers. When the video released, an old buddy of mine mentioned, hey, I've got a bunch of those. Do you want some? Yes, please. So thank you, Jimmy, for these, because these have been, I've already used them multiple times. In this one's got kind of a curved shape hook to it on both ends, and this one has that little zigzaggy hook. And on, let's see, which end is it? It's this end. I clipped off, this one's got the little, I don't know if you can really see it on camera, it's got a little bit of a bend to the tip. And I nipped that off on this end, so I've got that little hook on this end, but I can use this as just a straight pick. So he got these at a old dentist office that closed down. He's just accumulated these over the years working property management. I'll put a link down below. There's actually a link on Amazon for a dental tool. Now, not the same as these. They're the full like stainless or aluminum. They're not a plastic handle. But if you know somebody that's got access to dental supplies, that might be a way to pick something up like this. I got these for free, which I can't beat that, right? All right, I said early in this video that there was at least one on this list that I didn't have when I was younger because, well, frankly, it didn't exist. And that is a fiber optic camera. These things are relatively new as far as being affordable options, I think. I didn't look for a long time, but when I did look years ago, they were quite expensive, like a borescope. And I just could never bring myself to spend the money. Not a tool I would use all that often. And so I never did. When I was working on the Firebird and I was doing the spark plugs, if you watched that video, you saw me strip out the plug threads in the head. And it was in the very back and I couldn't see it. And I picked this up to see if it would help, and it did. And it saved me a bunch of time trying to figure out what the problem was, and then to turn around and be able to use it to put that thread corrector in and fix it and get those plugs in. This was under 30 bucks. I think it's on sale right now. It's got a coupon in the listing, like 10 or something % off. It's a little fiber optic camera. It's got a light at the end, and it kind of lights up where you're going. You can change the brightness of the light. It's Wi-Fi based and connects to your phone or tablet or whatever. It's not perfect. It's a cheap one. It's a little bit delayed in the transmission from over Wi-Fi, like from the camera to the phone, maybe a half a second or so. And it's hard to tell which way is up. There's no clear indicator on the camera itself what up is. So when you put it down wherever you're putting it and you look on it, sometimes your view is this way or this way, depending on the orientation of the camera, and you've got to kind of twist it and figure it out. So there are certainly some things that I would like better, but those come at a much higher cost. And I don't use this that often. I actually have used it more often than I thought I would. I use it for that. I've done some stuff like running wire and stuff inside of walls, which was pretty handy. It's cheaper than those, like a Bosch or whatever, Milwaukee. Those have a little bit, have a built-in screen, some nicer features, but they're, quite a bit more expensive, 2 or 3 times more expensive. So for the price point, for a tool that I use fairly infrequently, but really need it when I use it. This worked perfect for me. Included these in the previous tool video of kind of getting started tools as a level up, these ratcheting wrenches. It's a little on the pricier side relative to some of the other tools, but it's definitely at top of my list of tools I will always have. In fact, I've picked up a bunch more, and that's these ratcheting wrenches are super handy. When you don't have a lot of room to get a wrench in, but you got to take something loose, being able to ratchet your wrench, it was a game changer for me. Like I said that before, like it just blew my mind that I'm like, why did I not have these? Now again, this is another one of those tools that I think is fairly recent. Not as recent as maybe that cheap borescope, but you know, it's not like we've had these ratcheting wrenches around forever. When I was a kid, I don't recall them ever existing. And maybe they did and I didn't know it. But once I picked a set of those up, I've picked up 2 more sets in different sizes, and stubby ones, long ones, metric, English. And a little level up on these, I don't have any, but I wish I did, are ones that have a flexible head. So they'll flex up and down, and that way you can get into some tight, weird angles. That's probably my next buy. All right, so up to this point, most of these tools have been pretty budget friendly. In fact, that's kind of the reason why it was so weird I didn't have them. Like in that whole idea of, why didn't I buy these a long time ago? Like part of the reason why that was so annoying is because budget wasn't really the issue. Most of these tools are pretty cheap. These last 2 on this list though are gonna be another level up price point wise. And so this one in particular was one that I knew about. They were available, I knew them, I just couldn't afford them. I wasn't doing the kind of work, or at least so I thought, that would warrant spending the money on it. And that is a basic angle grinder. Now, some of you auto guys are going, well, yeah, duh. Like, of course you're gonna have an angle grinder. But, you know, when I was younger, I didn't think it was that big a deal. I didn't do a lot of cutting and grinding back then. What I didn't really appreciate was the versatility of an angle grinder. It's not just a grinder. You can put a sanding disc on it, you can put a cutting wheel on it, you can put, this is a ceramic blade, and you can put a flap disc on it, you can put a wire brush on it, all the different stuff you can use. And I realize, again, this is probably obvious to a lot of you, but it just wasn't to me. And then when it was obvious, like, oh yeah, boy, now I really wish I could get one. They were just, at that time for me, prohibitively expensive. This one, I got at a garage sale. I'm not suggesting you buy all your tools at garage sales, but it's a good place to get them, but particularly electric power tools. Electric power tools, not so much the battery ones, but corded electric power tools can last like forever, right? They can last a really long time. And so I think I got this for $25. I mean, something like that. It was just silly. Like, why didn't I think to check garage sales for this kind of stuff? You know, the battery powered ones, the batteries deplete over time, and the tools themselves are kind of expensive, and they change the formatting of them, and sometimes the batteries from an old tool doesn't fit the batteries for the new tool, or vice versa. So that, you know, that's a little different when you're getting into battery powered tools. But in electric tools, you know, you get a lot of life out of them. And a lot of people upgrade to the battery ones, and they have their electric ones laying around. I still got an old electric circular saw that I've had for years. If you don't have one, get one. And if you can't afford one, look around at your local rummage sales, or maybe a little estate sale or auction or something like that, and you might find one at a pretty good value. And then speaking of electric power tools, that brings me to the last thing on my list. I have a whole variety of different battery powered tools. I mentioned before, you know, like there's a cost effectiveness sometimes with battery tools versus air, but they're still quite expensive. And so it took me a while to be able to build to those. I went for a long time with just your basic electric drill. And then we were remodeling a kitchen years ago, picked up a relatively cheap Ryobi set that had an impact driver in it. And it's just one of these little 1/4-inch drivers, right? That for me was new, but like the concept was new, and driving long cabinet screws, my gosh, that was a game changer. And it was another one of those like, why did I wait so long? I can't believe I don't have one of these tools. And now I have a nice small Milwaukee one. This Milwaukee Fuel is 12 volt, awesome. It's real small, it's compact. I've got this, I've got the small 3/8 impact wrench, and a hammer drill, and a small little Sawzall. So I've accumulated over time odds and ends small tools. I don't have the 18 volt line in Milwaukee because I have the 18 volt in the Ryobi, but those are starting to, I've had those for a long time. The batteries are starting to wear out. The tools are starting to break down. As I feel the need to replace those, I'll probably replace them with the Milwaukee side. I'm sure, I'm not like telling you got to go Milwaukee. Pick your own. If you're already in a platform though, like you've got a DeWalt or Milwaukee or whatever your platform is, or you've got a drill and maybe a small little 1/4-inch driver, instead of investing in a large compressor, and I have a large compressor and a bunch of air tools, but you might find it's more cost effective and more convenient to go the battery powered route. The handy part about the battery powered route, and I do this a lot, I'm on the road a lot, picking up cars, buying and selling cars, evaluating, fixing friends' cars, sometimes fixing their cars in their driveway or their work parking lot sometimes. And so you can't just lug this giant 60-gallon air compressor with you everywhere you go. So this kind of stuff, you just throw in a tool bag, much more convenient. Cost-wise, you know, when all is said and done, as far as the investment goes, you can spend $700, maybe $1,000 on a really high-end 60 or 80-gallon compressor, and then a bunch of these air tools. Buys a lot of electric tools. There's value to both, and I do have both, but I think for me, the air tool thing was kind of an, you know, it's been around a long time, everybody has them, and I was really late to the battery powered power tool game. Most of that was cost. I just didn't have the budget for the battery powered stuff. I had a couple, you know, like I said, I had a couple of corded drills, a corded sawzall. I still actually do have a corded circular saw, but for automotive stuff, the battery powered stuff is definitely the way to go. By the way, this tool rack here is super handy. I'm not saying that's one of those things, but it also kind of is. It's another one of those things that I thought, I don't understand, this looks like super cheap and it's gonna fall apart. And I just never bothered to give it a second thought. It wasn't like I resisted, I just kind of blew it off. And I picked up this one recently, and man, like organizing all of my stuff, getting it out of the toolbox, this stuff takes up a lot of space in the toolbox. So maybe a bonus item. If you're gonna go the power tool route, pick up one of these storage racks, because man, it's nice to get that stuff out of your toolbox. And when you're trying to organize your garage, organize your shop, the more you can go up, the better. Get it off the floor, because you only have so much floor space. But we've got all this unused wall space, so use it. Well, there you go. There's my 10, I guess if you include that rack, 11 tools that I wish I'd bought a lot sooner. These really are tools that have been very convenient for me. They save me a lot of time. In some cases, they've actually saved me a little money. They've certainly paid for themselves over the years. And I sort of kick myself for not being more willing to either adapt to technology changes or, go ahead and pick up that relatively cheap tool that I think is kind of a gimmick. I'm curious though, what's on your list? What kind of stuff have you picked up over the years that you would say, hey guys, you guys are poo-pooing this thing, but it's pretty awesome and you should give it a look. Comment down below what's on your list or what you think is missing from mine. And it got me thinking, I actually have a bunch of tools that I bought and I've never used, like the opposite. That might be a fun video too. Like what are some tools that you've picked up over the years that was a colossal waste of money and you really thought it was going to be useful and now it just collects dust in your toolbox. So that'd be interesting too. Let me know down below. Anyway, I hope you found that helpful. Maybe you find some use out of this. Some links down below to the tools I use here that I've picked up. Maybe you find those useful. Hit the like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.